in this video, I want to speak specifically to the items that I bring when I'm teaching and painting plein air, in other words, on location. In just a few months, I'll be starting to plan travel for this year. And as I do that, I send out a supply list to anyone who's joining me on an in-person workshop. And depending on the workshop, the supply list can vary. If we're going to be having a lot of studio time, then we have a little more freedom to spread out, to bring a little extra gear because we don't have to trek around carrying a load. But in this video, I want to speak specifically to the items that I bring when I'm teaching and painting plein air, in other words, on location, especially if I'm going to be doing any walking. And my watercolor painting workshops that I do with the Blue Walk in Europe, these especially require me to plan ahead and pack light while still wanting to have everything I need to have a successful painting adventure. So I'm going to walk through what I bring to one of these watercolor trips. It's actually doesn't have to be a ton of stuff. And actually everything that I bring for the day can fit into this little pouch. And so let's take a look and just walk through what's in this bag right now. I haven't even looked at it since the last time I used it. And yeah, we'll just dive in. Okay, so this is the pouch that I bring on anytime I travel. And right now it does not have a sketchbook in it. The last time I used it, I had this sketchbook from Bockingford, and it actually does fit in here. And with a little bit of shifting things around, of course. But this pouch is just around 9x12 size, maybe a little bit bigger. And I really like the size of it. I have the pouches that I use for World Watercolor Month that are sold through the Doodle Wash World Watercolor Month website. And as you can see, it's a little bit smaller by maybe 1.5 inches all the way around. And so this, I have watercolor kits that I travel with that fit in this kit, in this pouch, but I do like the slightly larger size. And this one was a gift. I should actually track down a supplier that makes them. It also is really kind of filthy, and I should probably wash it. So let's take a look at what's inside here. First of all, I do plan to bring a sketchbook, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes the other sketchbooks, they're over here, that I love to use when I'm painting. This Bockingford one is made in the UK by St. Cuthbert's Mill. It is the only watercolor sketchbook that I have that is not 100% cotton. And yet the quality of the paper is actually pretty nice for a cellulose blend paper. So these I did just at Christmas. And so yeah, so it's not a bad sketchbook if that's the one that's available to you. The other thing I have is my watercolor palette. And this one, I'll post the Amazon link in the description below the video. I think it's made by Meeden and or Mielo. I always get the names mixed up. And I haven't cleaned the edge for a while, so it's a little bit sticky. But it actually has a rubber gusset or gasket all the way around that helps seal it so that when I travel, if paint is oozing out, which this color actually did, it doesn't come out of the palette itself. It stays contained. So that's really, really helpful. In this palette, and I'll share a link to the color list in the description below the video as well. They're my Daniel Smith dot card colors. And really, I love just these 18 colors that fit in this palette. You can see there's 5 little bonuses here. Just for fun, I added some extra colors. And the only color that's not on my Daniel Smith dot card that I like to bring is some kind of darkest dark, like Payne's Gray, or Rockwell has a color called Sea Blue Black, which is a really beautiful, deep blue black. And so I like having one of those darkest darks. I think one of the other ones here is Bloodstone Genuine, just for fun. This was just a fun addition that ended up oozing everywhere and making a mess. And this is Schminke's Manganese Violet, another color I love that's not made by Daniel Smith. So that's the palette. If you are traveling and plan to top up your palette before you leave, couple things to remember. Number one is please give yourself a couple days to fill the palette so that those colors have a chance to set. And the other thing is not all colors set firmly in the palette. If the paints you're using are honey based, two examples of this are Sennelier and M. Graham, they might not dry firmly in your palette. And if they are not setting in your palette, and actually this color is, I think it's this vivid blue made by Michael Harding, and that one made a mess as well. And so if that's the case, they have that honey base, you might just want to bring the tubes along and or just not travel with that particular variety of paint. It can be devastating when it always seems like it's the most vibrant color that decides it wants to ooze out and then contaminate other colors in the palette. Another option, if you have the honey-based colors, is bring a roll of Glad press and seal wrap, because that wrap, actually I have some here, I'll show you. So this product is really handy for individually sealing your palette wells. And having some of this along can be really useful, because what you can do is, provided your paints kind of fit their little spaces, you can press it up against each individual dam in between those palette wells. And you're just going to be a little bit safer if you're traveling with moist paints, because then those individual sections are sealed. So that product is really helpful if you're wanting to travel and be more certain of not making a mess. Nothing's foolproof, but the press and seal wrap can be really helpful. Okay, we're already seeing some of my other products rolling out. I like to keep an assortment of pencils in different densities. This is a B pencil. I have a pen here, a couple pens. One's a calligraphy pen, pigment marker. Generally, I'll throw a water bottle into my palette bag. If I'm not sure, I'll have a source of water where I'm going. And then these collapsible cups are really nice. They don't take up much space. This one's made by Faber-Castell. And I actually like to travel with two of these. If I have room to set up when I'm traveling, it's nice to have a container for rinsing my brush and a container for getting fresh, clean water for my painting. But one is sufficient as well. I always travel with these bulldog clips. If you're working with loose sheets of paper, or if it's a little bit windy, you have the ability to kind of secure some of your stuff with the bulldog clips. And the paper can then be attached to your painting board. I'll talk about that again a little more in a minute. Let's see what else is in here. I tend to get a little bit random as you get to the bottom of the bag. Just more pencils. This one is like an ultra black Cretacolor Nero, and standard number 2s. For some reason I have 3 of those. And this is a permanent black felt tip marker. Another fine tip pigment pen. I guess I have a phobia of running out of pigment pens. And this is another brush tip marker, which I don't think I've ever used. This is a lead holder, another pencil option that doesn't need to be sharpened. And these are 2 of my travel brushes. These are made by Rosemary and Company. And I'm going to show them to you. And to tell you the truth, I almost use these interchangeably. I don't feel like I have kind of a priority in which one I use for different purposes, because they're almost essentially the same size. This one is the R2, I think. It's starting to get worn there. And it is a sable brush. And this one is R9, I believe. Also hard to see. And you can see this has more of a quill setup with the wire that attaches the brush to the ferrule. I actually like the point of this one a little bit more than that one, but that just might be because I've used this one long enough that I've kind of worn the point down. That tends to happen with sable brushes. And really, it's nice to have some travel brushes, but it's not essential, because if you are traveling on the go, A brush roll can bring full-size brushes and it doesn't take up much space. This is my brush roll. It's just made of some kind of nylon. And I have a brush that actually is too big for the roll. I just kind of roll it up inside of the roll because it doesn't fit. It's too long to fit in here and have the flap come down. And I try to keep an assortment of brushes in here. Generally, probably if I'm going to be traveling, I might pull this one out because I know when I'm painting on location, I'm not painting very large paintings, and a huge brush like this probably won't be very useful. I might bring a palette knife just because sometimes I like scraping at my painting. I might bring a messy flat brush. I might bring a tidy flat brush. It's kind of, it's nice to have this assortment. I also like to bring a really fine small brush for signing my name. And then just these are assorted rounds. This one is my Cheap Joe's Loose Goose Dagger Striper, which was one of my favorite brushes for fine lines. Any brush that I'm really excited about using in my studio, I'll try to find a way to bring it along. And that's something that travel brushes can't really do for you. You know, you bring the travel brushes you own, but if you have a brush roll, you can bring whatever is, you know, making you feel inspired in your painting practice. Here's my second collapsible cup. It's also actually Faber-Castell. Don't know why they make them such hideous colors. The other thing I have, and this is something new to my kit, is a collapsible water bottle. Really handy because now I don't have to bring a disposable bottle. I can fill this up and it just can go into a cup holder or into my bag. And then once it's empty, it's no big deal to just flatten it out. Makes it real easy to travel with. That was a fun find on Amazon. A couple other things before we go back to the sketchbooks, and that is spray bottle. Again, make sure you empty it out and you don't have any actual fluids when you go to fly. Those can go in here. Let's put that in. I usually would like to have about 4 of these. Let's do 2 large and 2 small. And then if I want to put a sketchbook in, there is actually still room. This pouch holds so much. It's starting to get cozy, but I can even get the zipper done up. And there we go. We have a sketchbook. We have more than enough. You know, those 2 collapsible cups, for example, it's actually too much stuff. And really nice to know that's all in there. So let's talk about sketchbooks for watercolor. And I want to emphasize that a standard sketchbook is not going to have a watercolor weight paper. And so we want to look for watercolor sketchbooks. And here's an assortment that I have used and that I like. The Bockingford, as I've already mentioned. Kilimanjaro from Cheap Joe's Art Stuff. If you're in the States, this might very well be your best bet. The Kilimanjaro's sketchbook is 100% cotton, cold press, or you can get it in different textures. I like the cold press. And one thing I like about this sketchbook is that in between the watercolor sheets, there's a sheet of kind of standard paper. You can use that for making notes. Or it can just be a protective sheet between your paintings. And so that's really nice to have. And I like to bring a couple sketchbooks because what happens is if you're painting on location and you're painting away, this one's a 12 by 9, and this one's a 9 by 12. The only difference is the location of the spiral. They actually look different sizes, don't they? If you're painting on location, you've got this beautiful painting you've been working on, it's still wet, but you don't want to touch it, you want to move on to paint something else. You're not going to want to just turn the page and move to the next sheet of paper while this painting is still wet. So your options are limited. You sit there and wait, lose the light or whatever, or you pull out another sketchbook or piece of paper and you start painting on a new surface, and this one can get set aside to dry. So that's what I like to do. And so I always try to bring either 2 sketchbooks or a watercolor pad or block. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Before I do that, I want to show you one more sketchbook. This one is full just on the shelf with the 3 others in the series. I've been using this etcher attached now permanently. There we go. I've been using this Etcher Perfect Sketchbook. It's the limited edition Perfect Sketchbook. And I've been using it for probably 5 or 6 years now. And it's wonderful to travel with. Let's see if I can find a page where the painting got finished. Because this is really good paper. It's the Fabriano cold press paper. And because of the quality of the book, the leather cover, this feels like a keepsake to me. This page is falling out because I actually took a page out and gave it or sold it to I'm not sure which. But I've thrown this in my pouch so many times, and it's a wonderful record of my travels and even my home, my experiences over the year. And so I love having the Etcher Perfect Sketchbook. It is limited edition, so it's not always available on their website. The other Etcher sketchbooks are also 100% cotton, but I do find the quality of that 100% cotton paper is not as nice. And so generally I kind of go between this Perfect Sketchbook and the Kilimanjaro sketchbooks. Those are my preference. And, I haven't tried everything, so I can't speak for what's available. Do look for 100% cotton. If you can find a sketchbook that uses the same paper that you're used to using, that's a really big win. Arche does have a sketchbook now that they sell, but I'm not sure how affordable it is or how available it is depending on where you live. Finally, I do like to bring watercolor paper that's not in a sketchbook. For me, because I demonstrate for my students, that's probably the main reason that I would want to have individual sheets of paper or these blocks. This is Hanamula's basically 9 by 12 inch cold press block. Cold press paper is really nice for travel, and the blocks are nice because they are ready to paint on. They're bound on all 4 sides, so you don't even need to tape your paper to a firmer surface. You can just start painting. Same thing goes for the sketchbooks. When you have a wet painting and you want to move on to the next painting, you're either going to want to have a backup block or move to a sketchbook. So again, have more than one option so that you can keep painting in one session without waiting for your painting to dry. This Arche pad is a little bit bigger than I would usually travel with. I'd probably plan to bring the 9 by 12. And the difference between a block and a pad is simply that the pad is bound at the top, just like a notepad. So this is going to need to be removed from the pad and then mounted on a board so that you have a firm surface for painting. Now, I think it's a wonderful idea if you're going to be traveling with watercolor paper. Bring a Coroplast board or 2 along, because what you can do then is you can cut your own loose sheets of paper and stack them up on this board. Take the second board and put it in between, so you have a little paper sandwich, and that way when this goes into your suitcase, and this is where I might even use my clips to lock everything in place. When this goes into my suitcase, I don't have to worry about arriving at my destination and having my paper all crumpled or smeared or dirty. It's kept as safe as possible. Probably a good idea to clean the board before you do that. And I like my boards to be a little bit bigger than my watercolor paper so that you have a bit of a protective border around it. And if the border around your painting the paper is quite large, you might want to bring masking tape so that you can tape your paper to the board while you're painting. But otherwise, you can use your bulldog clips. And since this board is just a little bit too big for my paper, I'll clip it on 3 sides and the 4th, maybe chunk of tape, or maybe I just don't have to worry about it and it will behave itself. We'll trust that it will. And this is then ready to be painted on, and really quick to set up on location. The less time I have to spend setting up my paper to paint, the better. So if I'm working with loose sheets, I tend to clip them instead of taping them down. The other thing about bringing the Coroplast boards that I should mention is if you're painting on a block like this, as you might think, oh, I don't need the Coroplast boards and I won't bring them. But then when you finish a painting that you like, it comes off this block and then you have to find a place to store it on your way home. And so that's where a finished painting that you're happy with can go, this is just the back side, can go here and get carefully kept flat and uncreased on the way home. So just really helpful to have that Coroplast to travel. So let's take a look. We've got the watercolor pad. We've got, let's be ambitious and bring 2 sketchbooks for, different moods, I guess. And then let's also grab that painting bag. Now, depending on how light you pack, all of this can fit in a carry-on with, some clothes. I tend to check my baggage when I travel because I want to bring more stuff. I've always got a lot of stuff to share when I'm teaching. If I'm checking my bag, I usually put this pouch in my carry-on, and these items go into my checked baggage. If I was bringing any tubes of paint, these are going to go into my checked baggage as well, because there's varying opinions out there as to whether or not you're going to get a hard time from the security when they look at the gel or liquid in your paint tubes. The one thing also to be aware of is there are changes in cabin pressure when you're flying, and so traveling with tubes of paint, I haven't actually had it happen, but I have heard that sometimes the changes of pressure can cause the paint to ooze out of the tubes. I have not experienced that, but I would suggest putting them in a Ziploc bag so that if they do ooze a little bit, they're going to stay relatively contained. So that's a look at my on-the-go travel kit. I do, because I'm an instructor, I do bring an easel, and I'll pop a link to the easel that I travel with in the description below the video. But for my trips with the Blue Walk, I would encourage you not to worry about bringing an easel along. Most of the places where we end up have some kind of seating for you. So whether we're in a cafe or there's a bench overlooking a scenic viewpoint, there's options for you to just have a seat and be able to paint on your lap. And so that is kind of my preference for you, unless you're real comfortable carrying that extra 10 pounds that a easel might add. The easel I love is called the Plein Air Pro, and I'll post some images of it here. The other thing about an easel is it can work a lot like a sail if it gets windy. You kind of have to keep an eye on the weight of it. But the one thing I like about the Plein Air Pro is it's made for watercolor, and that means it has a little flat surface for your water and your palette. And it also gives you the option to adjust the angle of your painting so that it's not full vertical. The oil and acrylic painters don't mind having a strong vertical as they're painting. It doesn't work so well for watercolor. So that's why I try to look for a watercolor easel when I'm easel shopping, and also one that sets up really in a straightforward way. And that's the thing I really love about the Plein Air Pro. So that's a look at my travel kit. I tried to be as thorough as possible because if you're traveling with me to a workshop, I know you have a lot of questions and you don't want to bring the wrong stuff. Don't worry about it too much. The last thing I want to mention, and I should have mentioned it earlier when I showed you my palette, is that you get to choose which colors go into your palette. This is not a workshop where I am going to be saying, now choose this color and we're going to paint a wash, and then choose this color and we're going to do something else with it. I am not that pedantic about color choice. In fact, I believe that the best painting you will do will be with colors that you already know and are relatively familiar with, because you have the ability then to predict what they're going to do as you mix them with other colors, as you implement them into your painting. If you're choosing my colors because you think that will give you some kind of edge up during this workshop, what you're actually going to find is that you have a whole host of unfamiliar colors that you now have to learn, a new location which you have to become familiar with, and it's just a lot of things to keep track of and remember. So plan to come and be a learner, be an observer. You can pay attention to the colors I'm using, and then, make mental notes, make a list of the colors that you'd like to implement into your palette when we get home. But I would much rather see you working with colors that you know semi-instinctively, so that you can feel a little more freedom than to focus on the views in front of us. And that, I think, is always the best strategy. Dosing our learning so it's just not an overwhelming flood of new information. I'd love to answer your questions. Leave a comment below the video, send me an email, and watch your email for your course materials page that will go out to you with your travel package. All the info you need for the trip, for our trip together, and for your supply list will be found there. Hoping there's nothing I've missed. Maybe the last thing I would mention is, all of this stuff that we've just looked at should go in some kind of a backpack. So you can have a hands-free way to carry your art supplies when we're traveling together. And I don't have a recommendation as to the best backpack for you. The On Plein Air Pro comes with its own backpack, which made it easy for me to pack my easel around. It's still that extra weight, which is a bit of a nuisance. So when I'm traveling with just this, sometimes it's nice to have a smaller backpack, but look for something that feels comfortable to you and fits your gear, as well as, the little essentials that you might need personally through the day, your sunscreen, your water bottle, your money, your camera, so forth. And I can't wait to travel with you. I'm looking forward to meeting you and seeing you on our adventure together. Bye for now.